Hello and welcome to the Week in Politics with Michelle Grattan. I'm Caroline Fisher, Associate Professor of Journalism at the University of Canberra. Hello Michelle, how are you?
Hi Caroline.
We've had a week of inquiries and more inquiries. So the Labor government has announced a formal inquiry into the former Prime Minister's many ministries and also announced a Royal Commission into the robo-debt scandal. While continuing with their plans for the Job Summit next week. But look, let's begin with the ministries, the inquiry into Morrison's ministries. This week, the Solicitor General advised that the former PM, that the process had been entirely legal, but that it had undermined the processes of a responsible government. I mean, isn't that enough? Can we move on? Do we really need an inquiry into this?
Well, I'm a bit sceptical of an inquiry. Now, I might be proved wrong in the end. It might find some things that we really needed to know, but I think we've got the outline of this bad behaviour by the former Prime Minister, and if the government pushes it too far, it does look like it's a bit of a political witch hunt, that they're making an absolute meal of it. So I think that there was a case for leaving it, but nevertheless, obviously the government does want to drag it out somewhat, and there's a bit of payback in it too, because of course the coalition government had inquiries that ended up with the former Prime Ministers Rudd and Gillard appearing before them, royal commissions in those cases.
So do we know much about how it will be conducted? Will it be private hearings, public? Do we know much about that?
No, we don't. As we speak now, we haven't had the details. We are told that they'll come very soon, but it will be conducted by a judicial figure, a legal figure, and obviously ex-judges are often used in these cases.
Okay, so we've also had the announcement of the Royal Commission into the robo-debt scandal. I mean, as you just sort of implied, I mean, Labor has been criticised for focusing very much on the past and the errors of the previous government. I mean, does this justify a Royal Commission?
I think in this case, a Royal Commission is justified, because this was an immense scandal. A lot of people were wrongly accused of defrauding or getting money from the Commonwealth they weren't entitled to, and some people took their lives. Certainly many were in acute distress. And I think in this case, you had a scheme that was wrongly structured, then went off the rails, and then action wasn't taken quickly enough when it became obvious that lots of things were wrong. So I do believe that the public deserves an explanation, and I think that it's worth probing exactly how the thing was not fixed much earlier.
Okay, now looking to the future, the Labor government's Jobs and Skills Summit begins next week. There's a broad agenda for the summit, but what will be the main issues, and what do you think the government's hoping to get out of it?
I think the main issues boil down to industrial relations, the fact that the enterprise bargaining system isn't working effectively, and of course that goes to very slow wage increases, despite the fact that we've got low unemployment, incredibly low unemployment. Also, migration is an issue. We need more people, but there are always resistances to increasing migration, not least from the union movement. And related to that is the whole question of skills, training people locally, and what more can be done to improve our skill base quickly. What's interesting is that the ACTU this week put up a demand for multiple employer bargaining, for unions to be able to bargain across sectors, across employers in a sector. Now, this has been strongly resisted by business groups, but Tony Burke, the Workplace Relations Minister, has indicated that he's open to this idea. So I think we're going to see over the next few days in the run-up to the summit very intense debate and argument about this issue. Obviously, what the government wants to do is to get a consensus out of this summit. That does involve, I think, trade-offs on industrial relations, migration. If the employers are to give any ground on industrial relations, then the unions will be expected to give ground on migration, and of course the whole skills issue is in there as well. So we'll see how it goes, but it will be a big task to get consensus on industrial relations, even though everyone agrees that the system is largely broken.
The summit itself is only a day and a half, so most of the work is being done now beforehand in these pre-summit gatherings.
As of yesterday, ministers had 65 meetings, roundtables with stakeholders all over the country. So a great deal of work is being done in the run-up. It will be choreographed on the day and a half, but nevertheless there'll be dynamics at the actual gathering as well. And of course, a lot of networking behind the scenes by the participants.
Okay. So at the moment it seems like the government is travelling quite well in the polls. There was a poll this week showing that Albanese was leading Peter Dutton 55 points to 17 as the preferred Prime Minister. How much of a buffer does this give the government? You know, I mean, how long will that last, do you think, as it enters these very choppy waters and start to really tackle these domestic issues of costs of living, etc.?
Hard to put a time on it, but that buffer is important, and I think it does come from a feeling of relief by many people that the former government, which was very divisive, is gone. But while the polls are very strong for the government and for the Prime Minister, they also indicate that people don't really think that the cost of living issue is being handled effectively. And this is going to be a continuing problem for the government, and at some point I think that the community will turn at least grumpy, if not sour. Now, it should be stressed that a lot of these problems really cannot be solved by the government because, for example, much of the inflationary pressure is coming from overseas forces, the war in Ukraine and China's situation, its attempt to keep COVID minimal by lockdowns and so on. But nevertheless, governments get blamed whether it's actually their fault or not. So I do think that the government is entering a very testing few months ahead, and we'll have to wait and see and make judgments about how effectively it handles the problems at a later point, but it's not going to be easy.
Okay. Look, thanks, Michelle. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, Caroline.